Blood only matters until it asks you to betray yourself. That was the thought running through my head the night I stepped into my brother Ethan's house and felt the air shift. The lights were on, but the place felt empty, like a stage after the audience has gone home. No guards, no music, just silence stretching 12 feet high to the ceiling. I told myself I was there because of numbers, small discrepancies in a shipment report, a few $1,000s unaccounted for. In my world, small mistakes grow into funerals. I wasn't angry. I was precise. I walked across the marble floor, my footsteps echoing too loud in a house that used to feel familiar. Ethan and I grew up 3 miles from here, sharing a bedroom the size of this living room, whispering about the empire we'd build one day. Back then, loyalty was simple. Now it felt expensive. I called his name once. No answer. The quiet pressed harder. Then I heard it. A faint metallic scrape beneath my feet. Not a crash. Not a scream. Just the slow drag of metal against concrete. It came again, softer this time, like someone testing whether hope was still allowed to exist. I followed the sound down the hallway, past framed photos of charity galas and city officials who smiled too wide. The basement door was locked. Ethan never locked doors in his own house. I rested my hand on the knob and felt it, cold, like it hadn't been touched in hours. The scrape came again. I don't rush. I calculate. But that night, something inside me moved faster than logic. I opened the door and stepped into the dim light below. The air smelled like dust and old cement. The bulb overhead flickered, throwing long shadows against the walls. And then I saw her. Lily. I didn't know her name yet, but I would. She was sitting against the far wall, wrists secured, posture straight, eyes steady. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was watching me like I was the one being judged. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I've negotiated with senators and stared down men twice my size without blinking. But her silence unsettled me more than any threat ever had. I know who you are, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't broken. It was certain. That's when I understood this wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. My brother's house. My family's name. My legacy standing in a basement with a woman who shouldn't have been there. Footsteps sounded at the top of the stairs. Slow. Unhurried. Ethan leaned against the doorframe like we were discussing weekend plans. She's leverage, he said, almost bored. Leverage. A word we used in boardrooms, not basements. I looked at him, then at her. And in that narrow, flickering light, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't choosing between right and wrong. I was choosing between blood and conscience. And for the first time in my life, they were not the same. My brother did not flinch when I looked at him. He stood at the top of the stairs with his hands in his pockets like we were discussing an investment strategy instead of a human life. The light from above framed him in gold, the same way it used to when we were kids playing in the driveway at sunset. For a second, I saw the boy who used to follow me everywhere. Then I saw the man who thought leverage was more important than dignity. Explain, I said. My voice did not rise. It did not need to. Ethan sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. He walked down 3 steps, slow and deliberate. She saw something she was not supposed to see, he replied. She knows about the port deal. About the accounts routed through Chicago. Lily's eyes shifted to me, steady and unafraid. There was dust on her sleeve, but her posture remained straight, like she refused to let the room define her. I did not go looking for it, she said calmly. But once you see the truth, you cannot pretend it is invisible. Her words landed heavier than any accusation. I felt the weight of our last names settle on my shoulders, the same name engraved on buildings across the city, the same name whispered in fear and respect. Ethan spread his hands slightly. This is how we protect ourselves, he insisted. Temporary. Strategic. Temporary. The word echoed in the concrete space. There is nothing temporary about a choice that stains your conscience. I walked closer to Lily, close enough to see the reflection of the flickering bulb in her eyes. She did not look at me like a monster. She looked at me like a decision waiting to be made. That unsettled me more than anger ever could. You could have handled this differently, I said to Ethan without turning around. You could have called me. He let out a short laugh. And what would you have done? Let her walk away? Risk everything father built? Father. Another ghost in the room. We were raised on rules carved into stone. Loyalty above all. Family before feelings. Power over weakness. But no one ever told us what to do when family became the weakness. I straightened slowly. The air felt thinner, like the basement was shrinking inch by inch. Our strength was never fear, I said quietly. It was control. Ethan's jaw tightened. He heard the shift in my tone. He knew me well enough to recognize when a line had been crossed. Lily inhaled softly, the smallest sound in the room, but it cut through everything. She was not pleading. She was enduring. And endurance is a kind of power most men underestimate. I looked at my brother fully now. Unlock her, I said. It was not a threat. It was not a negotiation. It was a boundary. For the first time that night, Ethan hesitated. In that pause, I saw it clearly. This was no longer about a deal in Chicago. It was about the kind of men we were willing to become. And I understood something with absolute certainty. If I allowed this, I would not just lose my conscience. I would lose myself. The hesitation in Ethan's eyes lasted less than a second, but I saw it. That was all I needed. My brother had always been decisive, sharp, relentless in meetings, ruthless in negotiations. Now there was a crack. Do not make this dramatic, he said, his voice lower, controlled. You are thinking emotionally. I walked past him up the stairs, slow enough for him to feel the shift in gravity. When I reached the top, I turned and looked down at both of them from that narrow landing. No, I answered calmly. I am thinking clearly. The house felt different now. Larger. Colder. The air conditioning hummed through the vents, steady and indifferent, like the world outside had no idea what was unraveling inside these walls. I took my phone from my pocket, but did not dial. I did not need witnesses. I needed clarity. You said she saw something. I continued. So this is about risk. Ethan stepped up 2 stairs. It is always about risk. His voice sharpened. We built this by eliminating it. I shook my head slowly. We built this by managing it. There is a difference. Lily's quiet breathing carried up from the basement. It was steady, controlled. She trusted that something was shifting. That trust felt heavier than any weapon ever could. I looked back at my brother, at the familiar line of his jaw, at the same gray eyes we inherited from our father. For years I believed loyalty meant standing beside him no matter what. Now I understood loyalty also meant stopping him before he destroyed everything we claimed to protect. Unlock her, I repeated. This time there was no space for debate. Ethan's expression hardened. If she talks, it leads back to us. Then we give her no reason to, I said. Silence fell between us, thick as concrete. He studied me, measuring whether this was a bluff. It was not. I was not choosing her over him. I was choosing the kind of man I would be tomorrow morning. After a long moment, Ethan exhaled through his nose and reached into his pocket. The sound of keys shifting against metal echoed louder than it should have. Each step he took down into the basement felt like a countdown. I followed, not because I did not trust him, but because I needed him to know I was watching. The flickering bulb still buzzed overhead. Lily looked up as we approached. There was no triumph in her eyes, only awareness. Ethan knelt and unlocked the restraints without a word. The metal fell away with a soft clink against the floor. He stood immediately, distancing himself from the act, as if it had cost him nothing. Lily rubbed her wrists slowly, standing on steady legs. She did not rush toward the door. She did not thank me. She simply looked at me and asked, "What happens now?" It was a simple question. It carried the weight of everything. I held her gaze, then glanced at my brother. "Now," I said quietly, "we decide what kind of family we are going to be." In that basement, under a single trembling light, I realized the real empire was not built on fear. It was built on the choices we refused to regret. Family is not tested when it is easy. It is tested when it costs you something. Lily stood fully upright now, the faint tremor in her hands fading as circulation returned, but her spine remained straight, unbent. Ethan moved away from her as if distance could erase the last hour. The basement felt smaller than before, the single bulb still buzzing above us, casting long shadows that made all 3 of us look like strangers. I stepped closer to Lily, careful, measured. "You are leaving this house tonight," I said quietly. Not a question, a decision. She studied me, searching for deception. In my world, trust is rarely offered. It is negotiated. Yet she seemed to understand something unspoken. "And the port deal?" she asked. There was no accusation in her tone, only clarity. She knew enough to be dangerous, but not reckless. I glanced at Ethan. His jaw was tight, pride wounded more than his authority. The deal will be restructured, I replied. Clean. Transparent. No shadows that require silence. Ethan let out a short breath of disbelief. You think the city respects clean? He asked. The city respects strength. I looked at him evenly. Strength without restraint becomes decay. The words settled heavily between us. For years, I believed protecting our name meant eliminating threats. Tonight I understood that protecting our name might mean changing it. Lily took a slow step forward, testing her balance. She did not rush toward the stairs. She did not collapse in relief. Instead, she faced Ethan. You were afraid, she said softly. Not cruel, not mocking, just honest. Ethan stiffened. Fear is the one thing men like us never admit to. I watched his reaction closely. There it was again, that flicker behind his eyes. Not guilt. Not yet. But doubt. I turned toward the stairs and gestured upward. We are done down here, I said. The word done carried more weight than either of them realized. As we climbed, the air felt warmer, lighter, like oxygen returning to a sealed room. The living room lights still glowed against polished marble and framed photographs. A perfect picture of success. Lily paused near the entrance, glancing back once at the hallway that led below. You cannot undo tonight, she said quietly. She was right. There are moments that divide your life into before and after. I slipped my jacket from my shoulders and handed it to her without ceremony. It was a simple gesture, but in my world, gestures matter. Ethan remained near the staircase, silent now, watching me like he was recalculating everything he thought he knew about his older brother. I met his gaze steadily. This does not leave this room, I told him. Not because we are hiding it, but because we are correcting it. He did not argue. He only nodded once, slow and conflicted. I walked Lily to the front door and opened it. Cool night air drifted in from the street, carrying the distant hum of traffic 3 blocks away. The city continued breathing, unaware that something fundamental had shifted inside one house. She stepped outside, then paused. Why? She asked. The question was simple. The answer was not. I looked past her at the skyline, at buildings that carried our influence in quiet ways. Because power means nothing, I said calmly, if it costs you the man you are supposed to be. And as she walked down the driveway beneath the streetlight, I realized I had not just freed her. I had drawn a line that could never be erased. The night air felt different once she stepped beyond the gate. Colder, sharper, like the city itself was waiting to see what I would do next. I watched Lily walk beneath the streetlight at the end of the driveway, my jacket resting on her shoulders, the fabric too large for her frame, but steady around her like a quiet promise. She did not look back again. She did not need to. I had already made the choice that mattered. Behind me, the front door remained open. Ethan had not moved. I could feel his stare between my shoulder blades, heavy with questions he did not know how to ask. I closed the door gently and turned to face him. The house felt enormous now, 20-foot ceilings stretching above us like a cathedral built on pride. You embarrassed me, he said finally. His voice was controlled, but underneath it was something raw. Not anger. Not exactly. Fear of losing ground. No, I replied calmly. I corrected you. The words hung between us, impossible to retract. Ethan walked toward the bar near the window, pouring himself a drink he did not touch. You think she will stay silent because you were noble for 5 minutes? He asked. I stepped closer, keeping my tone steady. She will stay silent because we will give her no reason to speak. He shook his head slowly. You are changing. I held his gaze. I am refining. There is a difference between weakness and restraint. Most men never learn it. I moved to the window and looked out at the street. Lily was reaching the corner now, her silhouette smaller against the glow of traffic lights 3 blocks down. I could have sent a driver. I could have ordered security to escort her. I did not. She deserved to walk away on her own terms. Ethan finally set the glass down untouched. Father would not approve, he muttered. The name settled in the room like dust. For years, we built our decisions around a man who believed power meant control at any cost. But Father was gone, and we were still here. Father built an empire, I said quietly. But he did not teach us how to keep our souls. Ethan did not answer. His silence told me more than words could. The foundation between us had shifted. Not shattered. Not yet. But cracked. I turned from the window and faced him fully. The Chicago accounts will be restructured by Friday, I said. No hidden clauses. No leverage disguised as strategy. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. For the first time in years, he was calculating around me instead of with me. That realization carried its own weight. I walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to let the moment settle. This is not about her, I added quietly. It is about us. Outside, my car engine hummed as I stepped into the driver's seat. I did not start the engine right away. I sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the empty stretch of road ahead. I had not just protected a stranger tonight. I had drawn a boundary inside my own bloodline. And boundaries, once drawn, demand to be defended. As I finally pulled away from the curb, I understood something with unsettling clarity. The city would not change overnight. My brother would not change easily. But I had crossed a line that separated who I was raised to be from who I was choosing to become. And there is no returning once you make that choice. I did not sleep that night. I drove aimlessly through streets I owned in contracts, but did not fully understand in conscience. The city lights blurred across the windshield, red and white streaks stretching for miles, like consequences waiting at every intersection. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, just before 2 a.m, the house felt unfamiliar. Larger than usual. Quieter. Success has a way of amplifying silence. I walked inside, loosened my tie, and poured a glass of water I did not drink. My reflection in the kitchen window looked composed. Calm. Controlled. But there was something new in my eyes. Not weakness. Awareness. By 7 o'clock, I was in my office downtown, 40 floors above the street. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the skyline, the river cutting through concrete like a reminder that even stone yields over time. My phone buzzed 3 times before I answered. It was Ethan. We need to talk, he said without greeting. His voice was tight, restrained. We are talking now, I replied evenly. There was a pause. You cannot restructure everything overnight, he continued. The partners will question it. I leaned back in my chair, watching traffic crawl 12 stories below. Let them question, I said. We will give them answers. Silence again. Ethan was not used to answers that did not include pressure. You are risking perception, he said. Perception is power. I exhaled slowly. No. Integrity is power. Perception is temporary. I ended the call before the argument could circle. The truth is, I was not only challenging my brother. I was challenging the foundation we were raised on. An assistant knocked lightly and stepped inside with the morning briefing. Market updates. Shipping confirmations. Legal summaries. Normal operations. The empire had not collapsed overnight. It was still functioning, still profitable, still respected. But something subtle had shifted. Around noon, my private line rang. A number I did not recognize. I let it ring once before answering. This is Adrian, I said calmly. A breath on the other end. Then her voice. I did not expect you to answer. Lily sounded different outside that basement. Clearer. Stronger. I do not ignore calls I am responsible for, I replied. Another brief silence. I am not calling to threaten you, she said. I am calling to understand what happens now. I stood and walked toward the window, sunlight pouring across the polished floor. Now, I said carefully, you go. Back to your life. And we correct what should never have happened. She hesitated. And if your brother disagrees? I watched a barge move slowly along the river, steady against the current. Then he will learn that being family does not mean being untouchable. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. She exhaled softly. Not relief. Not fear. Recognition. You are not what I expected, she said. I almost smiled. Neither am I admitted. After we ended the call, I remained by the glass, staring at the city that had shaped me. Power had always been about control. But control without conscience had nearly cost me something I could not measure in dollars or square footage. I understood now that protecting an empire was simple compared to protecting your own integrity. And I knew the real challenge was not freeing her. It was ensuring that the line I drew would never be crossed again, not by my brother, not by my partners, and not by me. Power is easy when everyone agrees with you. It becomes real when someone does not. By late afternoon, the boardroom was full, 12 seats around a 20-foot walnut table, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a gray sky that threatened rain. Our partners sat in tailored suits, watches worth more than most houses, eyes sharp with calculation. Ethan arrived last. He did not look at me as he took his seat to my right. The tension between us was invisible to everyone else, but it hummed beneath the surface like an electrical current. I stood without notes. I never needed them. Effective immediately, I began, my voice steady and even. The Chicago routing structure will be simplified. Full transparency across subsidiaries. No off-ledger contingencies. A ripple moved around the table. Not panic. Not yet. Concern. One of the senior partners cleared his throat. That reduces our leverage, he said carefully. I met his gaze. It reduces our exposure. Words matter. Exposure sounds dangerous. Leverage sounds clever. The room shifted in my favor. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And if competitors interpret this as weakness? He asked, his tone neutral but pointed. I did not break eye contact with the table. Then they misunderstand strength, I replied. We are not retreating. We are refining. Silence settled. I could feel the weight of their attention measuring my conviction. In this world, hesitation is fatal. Certainty is currency. After a long pause, the same partner nodded once. If this protects the brand long term, I support it. One by one, the others followed. Not because they suddenly valued morality, but because they valued stability. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped softly against polished wood. Handshakes were exchanged. Agreements sealed. The empire remained intact. Only the foundation had shifted. Ethan stayed seated as the room emptied. When the door closed, the quiet felt heavier than the earlier debate. You think this solves everything, he said quietly. I remained standing across from him. No, I answered. It sets a precedent. He looked up at me then, frustration flickering beneath his composure. You chose her over me. The accusation was simple. It deserved a simple answer. I chose us over a mistake, I said. There is a difference. He shook his head slightly. You do not understand what it takes to maintain control. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Control without limits becomes chaos. I will not let our name become that. For a moment, I saw the younger version of him again, the boy who used to look to me for direction. Now he was searching for certainty in a world that felt less predictable. And if she talks anyway, he asked. I thought of Lily's voice that morning. Clear, measured, unafraid. She will not, I said calmly. Because we did not give her a reason to. Ethan stood slowly. The distance between us felt both small and enormous. You are changing the rules, he said. No, I replied. I am remembering them. He walked past me without another word. I remained in the empty boardroom, watching the rain finally begin to fall against the glass, thin lines sliding down 40 stories to the street below. Power had always meant commanding the room. Today it meant commanding myself. And as the storm gathered over the skyline, I understood that the hardest battles are not fought against rivals. They are fought within the family you refuse to lose. Rain stayed on the windows long after the meeting ended, thin silver lines sliding down the glass like quiet reminders that pressure never truly disappears, it only changes form. I remained in the boardroom until the city lights began to replace the gray sky, watching reflections overlap with the skyline. Power had always been loud in my life. Deals, signatures, commands. But the decision I made days ago was silent, and somehow heavier than all of it. That evening I left the tower without an escort, something I had not done in years. The sidewalks were still damp, the air cool against my face as I walked the last 2 blocks instead of taking the car. 3 blocks from the river, I saw her. Lily stood outside a small cafe, sleeves rolled up, speaking with an older woman who looked worried. There was no fear in her posture. No sign of what had happened in that basement. Just presence. I stopped across the street, unnoticed, watching the way she listened more than she spoke. When the woman left, Lily turned and saw me. She did not look surprised. She crossed the street calmly, stopping a few feet away. You walk without security now? She asked softly. There was a hint of challenge in her tone. Sometimes, I replied. It reminds me I am human. She studied me in the fading light. Your brother will not forget, she said. I nodded once. Neither will I. A car passed between us, and the city noise filled the pause. Why are you here? She asked. It was a fair question. I searched for the honest answer instead of the strategic one. To see if you were afraid, I said quietly. She held my gaze. I am not afraid of you, she replied. I was afraid of what you might choose. The words struck deeper than any threat ever could. I stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to understand. And now? I asked. She exhaled slowly. Now I think you are still deciding. She was right. Reforming an empire is not a single act. It is a pattern, a discipline. I looked past her at the cafe window, reflecting both of us side by side. Two people from different worlds connected by one irreversible night. I meant what I said. I told her. There will be no shadows that require silence. She nodded, not impressed, not dazzled, just assessing. Then make sure your actions stay louder than your reputation, she said. A simple sentence. A standard. In my world, standards are rarely given. They are enforced. But this one felt different. It felt earned. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Ethan. I silenced it without looking. For the first time, urgency did not control me. Choice did. Lily glanced at the movement, understanding more than I explained. You cannot protect everyone, she said gently. No, I agreed. But I can decide who I refuse to harm. The streetlight flickered on above us, casting a steady glow over wet pavement. She offered a small, almost reluctant smile before stepping back toward the cafe. Good night, Adrian, she said. Hearing my name without fear changed something inside me. As she disappeared through the door, I realized redemption is not granted in a single grand gesture. It is built inch by inch, choice by choice. And for the first time, I was not trying to control the night. I was trying to deserve the morning. The city always looks peaceful from a distance. Lights steady, traffic flowing, buildings standing tall like promises carved in steel. But peace is never automatic. It is chosen. The morning after I saw her outside that cafe, I called a private meeting with our senior partners and our legal team. No grand speeches. No theatrics. Just numbers projected across a 40-foot screen and contracts revised line by line. The Chicago accounts were cleaned. Offshore layers dissolved. Every structure that relied on silence was replaced with one that could withstand scrutiny. Some partners resisted. A few quietly withdrew. I let them. An empire that depends on fear is fragile. One that survives transparency becomes unshakable. By late afternoon, the restructuring was official. Documents signed. Statements prepared. The shift was irreversible. Ethan did not attend the final signing. Instead, he waited in my office after everyone left, standing by the window where I usually stood. You are dismantling what we built, he said without turning around. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had a week ago. I stepped inside and closed the door gently. No, I replied. I am preserving it. He faced me then, conflict written across his expression. You think this makes you better than me? I held his gaze steadily. This is not about being better. It is about being responsible. The word lingered in the room. Responsible. Not powerful. Not dominant. Responsible. He walked toward the desk slowly, resting his hands on the edge. And if we lose influence? He asked. I moved to stand across from him. The same distance we kept as children when we were unsure whether we were about to argue or agree. Then we rebuild it the right way, I said calmly. Influence earned lasts longer than influence imposed. Silence stretched between us. For the first time, he did not argue. He simply studied me, as if trying to understand when the shift happened. The truth is, it happened the moment I realized I did not want to inherit fear as my legacy. It happened the moment I saw someone refuse to break in a basement and understood strength differently. Ethan straightened slowly. And what about her? He asked. There was no resentment in his tone now. Only curiosity. I considered the question carefully. She lives her life, I answered. And we live with our choices. That night, I drove alone again, this time not out of unrest but out of clarity. I passed the river, the cafe, the streets that once felt like territory and now felt like responsibility. I did not need to see Lily to know the line I drew still stood. Redemption is not a dramatic transformation. It is discipline. It is waking up every day and choosing not to return to who you used to be. As I parked outside my house and turned off the engine, the silence felt different than it had days ago. Not heavy, not accusing, steady. I understood something with complete certainty. Power can rule a city. Fear can command a room. But integrity is the only thing that lets you stand alone in the dark without flinching. And that night, for the first time in my life, I did not flinch.